Welcome. Welcome, everyone. All of us here, the thousands of us that have turned up to this. I'm so thankful the audience has made it. Welcome to my talk today on the Agile Network. Now, I've got an hour for a topic that could potentially cover 6, 7, 8 years. I think probably, let's say about 8 years worth of material. Though that's just talking. In terms of workshopping, it could be 2 decades worth of material. And so I'm really going to try and give you here today a really concentrated hour of stuff. Um, don't worry, if you watch this once, you can replay it, rewind it, and watch bits again and pull those parts out. Okay, so what we're going to try and do is give you just like concentrated Nigel. That's terrifying. And concentrated agility. That sounds fun. And concentrated scaling for the next 60 minutes. Okay, and try and talk you through this from a variety of different angles from my rather unique perspective. Now, wait, what's that I can hear? What can I hear you asking for? You want lots of PowerPoint slides? Well, your wish is granted. I have them here for you. Here we go, PowerPoint. So, scaling, unveiling, changing, failing, scaling. That is the entire point of this presentation. What are we trying to do? Let's look at some better ways of doing big work. But let me start you off with me. Now, you may not know who I am. You could be based in America or Australia or the moon. But my name's Nigel Baker. I'm an agile coach and I've been an agile coach for a long time. I started off as a childhood programmer. So my father had a computer before I was born in the late 70s. I believe it was a Commodore PET, I believe. And so I've grown up with this technology in my life. I've been in IT nearly 30 years. I've been one of the first people in the agile movement, not the first, but one of the early adopters in the UK over, it's more than 22 years, probably over 22 years now. I've been a coach for nearly 20 years of this. I've seen lots of things around the world. I've seen things you wouldn't believe. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Okay. Now, before we get going with this presentation, I am a great believer. If you've seen any of my presentations before, you know I'm a great believer in this phrase, context is king. I always think if you understand the conditions surrounding something, you understand the environment, you understand the philosophy, the principles surrounding a world, you can then understand why things in that world are how they are. So let me start you off with the organization that I'm a part of, the ScrumAlliance. So let me tell you a little about the ScrumAlliance. So the ScrumAlliance, non-profit organization based in America, I believe in Denver, founded around 2001 as an offshoot of the Agile Alliance. So the Agile Alliance, if you know, was the large non-profit formed after 2001, after the 18 signatories came together and wrote the Agile Manifesto. A large number of them carried on that work and founded a non-profit dedicated to sort of training and coaching and educating the world in these agile ideas. And the Scrum Alliance started off as a side hustle within that and became a separate organization soon after, led by Ken Schwaber, Esther Darby, and Mike Cohen. Now, the Scrum Alliance to me is really been founded on the CSM training, Certified Scrum Master Training, one of the most famous agile trainings on earth, the real first agile training on earth, the first sort of agile certificate that ever existed. This was kind of the building block on which the Scrum Alliance was built, the rock on which the Scrum Alliance was built. I believe there's been about 1.3 million people certified as Scrum Masters around the world. Now, back in 2009, so that's 15 years ago, Ken Schwaber was removed. You decide. My job is not politics, especially in a pre-recorded video. What I would say was he left for reasons. And this has left the Scrum Alliance ever since as pretty much a community-based organization, which is quite interesting because a lot of the other agile certification organizations out there are actually what I would call led by a senior figure who owns it or mostly owns it and sets the direction of it. That has not been the case of the Scrum Alliance. The Scrum Alliance has been a community-led organization. Now, in my experience, and again, all how true is this? It's true in my point of view. But if you look here on the screen, I've listed out some famous people. Now, you may not know who they are. These were prime ministers of the UK. And what was always funny in Britain, there always seemed to be, before we had Brexit, the car crash that was Brexit, before that, we always seemed to have a bit of a pattern in our prime ministers, in that we would have one who's a bit of a, like the one on the far left there, Edward, or was it the far right? Depends on which way you look at it. Callahan. He was a prime minister, someone who was regarded as a negotiator, a person who could work with people. He would get the unions in, talk to them, persuade them about how things should be done. You know, a bit of a the people person, but someone who can work the crowd a bit. The country got into real trouble. And so he was replaced by Margaret Thatcher. Now, whether you like her or hate her, she was the Iron Lady. She had a vision and she was going to step on you to achieve results. Vision, principles, people skills, not so much. Then they replaced her with John Major, a people skill person, someone who's not visionary but who can work the audience a little bit. And then Tony Blair, who was a vision, and it goes on and on and on. And we've done this in the Scrum Alliance. Every time we've had a CEO for a few years, we tend to have them, get them for a reason. Hey, you're a great people person. After a few years, go, but you're not great at the vision thing, are you? Get rid of them and replace them with an alternative. Ah, you're a vision person. Oh, wait, you don't have many agile skills. Get rid of them. Hey, you're agile, flipping backwards and forwards. And this has meant the Scrum Alliance has changed direction on scaling a lot over the years because it hasn't had a serious guru figure driving things through. The Scrum Alliance has gone through a variety of steps with scaling and its relationships with large agile delivery. So originally, there was this idea that we didn't really need to scale, Scrum scales on its own. And then many years ago, the Scrum Alliance entered into agreement with Scaled Agile, SAFe. Hey, let's work together a little bit. Then that kind of fell apart. Then they started working with large scale Scrum for a bit. Then that kind of went away. They had a joint venture with Jeff Sutherland and his Scrum at Scale scaling approach. And that didn't go so well. Again, not going to get me talk about that on a video. That didn't go so well is a nice way to put it. And finally, the Scrum Alliance decided to build its own scaling product, its own product in the world of scaling. Now, it was called CAS S1 until 3 weeks ago when it got renamed Certified Agile Scaling Practitioner. Now, Certified Agile Scaling Practitioner. And there was one key thing about this work. They said, we're going to build this new product, but it's not going to be another framework competing with all the other frameworks. You must have seen this, I think it's, was it XKCD? Is it this famous joke about competing standards? We have 14 competing standards. Ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Solution, you end up with 15 competing standards. And we've already seen this happen multiple times in the industry where things have appeared to try to be a meta method over all of them, and all they are is now another method competing with all the others. So the Scrum Alliance was very clear. It said, look, we want something that can help our community with scaling, but we don't want to just invent another framework or another methodology to compete with them. We want to try and have something wider and more encompassing. So they use the word framework agnostic. Okay, framework agnostic, which I think is a nice term for it. So trying to look above the bigger picture over which framework you would pick. Now, you may ask, why? Why does the Scrum Alliance want to do this? Why did they want to invent a new product in a pretty mature industry space? Now, and if you're going to accuse them of just seeking money, I'm afraid that's not the answer. The reason is it wasn't for financial gain. The reason is the Scrum Alliance had this report they co-wrote with the Business Agility Institute about the future of Agile. And this report, up until very recently, has pretty much set the direction of the Scrum Alliance in the last couple of years. And in that report, we were talking about how Agile has won. Agile's won the conversation. We've moved from early adopters to late majority. Agile's become commoditized, and that means organizations, there may be more opportunities there to spread Agile wider into the organization, but the fundamental core space is quite overloaded. Now, I don't know if I believe that report, or at least I may have used to believe that report. But if we've won, somehow Palpatine has returned. Because if you look at agile organizations that proclaim themselves agile at the moment, they can often look incredibly bureaucratic with large frameworks, safe or something like the scaled agile framework, and maybe with large Jira implementations. A lot of people, when they talk about scaling and agile, what they really have in their head is Atlassian's Jira product, really capturing what they're doing and talking to them about that's what they visualize it to be. And so the combination of these two things have made the world pretty heavy. Now remember what George said, George Santanaia, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So in a minute, okay, sorry. For those of you here live, in about 50 minutes, Alistair's talking, Alistair Coburn. For those of you who are not live, watch this video and then go watch Alistair's after, who's coming on after me next in the broadcasts. Because Alistair said this over 24 years ago. This was the reason he wanted to get together and start writing that Agile Manifesto, because he was concerned in 2001 about this fat methodology armory out there, these huge, heavy methods, needed lots of paperwork to be safe. That's a bit on the nose. And this idea of just like, I want a turnkey methodology, one that works straight out the box, something I don't have to think with. And this was the challenge he saw in 2001. Well, I'm afraid to say that's been the challenge today. In our methods have got incredibly heavy, incredibly bureaucratic. And I'm afraid to say the world's moved on from that report. What I'm seeing a lot of is I've jokingly called it the Tarkin model because I don't know what else to call it. I don't even know if it has a name. But I don't know if you've ever seen Star Wars. There's this famous scene in Star Wars that I'm going to recreate for you. So these generals are arguing about the bureaucracy of the empire, and the chief bad guy, Governor Grand Moff Tarkin, comes in and says, "The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us. I have just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the council permanently. The last remnants of the old republic have been swept away." But that's impossible. How will the Emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy? The regional governors now have direct control over their territories. Fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station. All over the world today, I have been seeing a collapse in the agile job market. Some people, have you seen this? A massive collapse in Scrum Master jobs and Agile coaching jobs. And people have been saying, oh my God, Agile's dead. No, I'll tell you what's dead. IT's dead. There's been a huge collapse in all IT jobs. I have multiple friends who have senior, major IT positions, nothing to do with Agile, not coaches and stuff. They're engineering managers, they're change managers, and they are losing their roles. There's this huge consolidation happening because we're seeing this. We're seeing people who, now, whether you read the fancy books on product centricity or whatever, but they're reading all bureaucracy is evil. We must collapse it completely, have a few leaders setting direction, and have people just doing what they're told. A collapse of empowerment, a collapse of organization, purely to get back to almost the regional governors now have direct control over their territories. I'm seeing organizations where they're saying the engineering managers have complete control over their teams. The teams can do the managers can do what they like with their teams. Agile, Scrum or not, no one cares. You have control. And that's terrifying. This sort of collapse. Again, I was concerned when I thought it was an agile collapse, but it's looking more like an IT collapse. They're stripping out of management. They're stripping out of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy isn't evil. Too much bureaucracy is wasteful. But treating bureaucracy like it is toxic. Treating process like it's venom is actually very dangerous in a large organization, because if you strip out too much, you can end up with a very fragile business. And you only discover that when something goes wrong. So anyway, the Scrum Alliance were looking for volunteers to help build this new product. And I said, guess what? I'm a mug. I will volunteer to help. And lots of people got volunteered and then didn't get picked. I got picked mainly because I've been doing this job for 20 years, helping organizations improve all over the world using all different methods. So we can see the situation the world is in now. How can we help that be better? How can we help our organizations get better and not throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater? Because the joke is this: I used to be quite anti-safe, anti the scaled agile framework. I used to make little jokes about it. I've got a good joke coming in about 6 slides time. Keep an eye out for it. I used to make jokes about this. Look how rubbish it is. Blah blah blah. We've got to be better. Okay, but here's the problem. Here is the problem, which is when people badmouth safe and throw it out. So the senior leaders go, "This safe thing is awful. Get rid of it." The trouble is, they're not getting rid of safe. They're getting rid of agile, because to the civilians, this is all the same. So all of us inside the agile world with our little, hey, I'm a Kanbaner, not a scrummer. Hey, I'm Scrum, I'm not safe. To the outside world, we're all agilicists, and we need to appreciate this. If one of us fails, we all fail. And so we need to approach this in a far more inclusive, open-minded, and constructive manner. That still doesn't mean I'm not going to make a couple of jokes about it as we go along. So what I did was, before I started working with the Scrum Alliance, I wrote down all my thoughts up front, purely so I had some record that I didn't invent them whilst doing the work. So the intellectual property was owned by me still. And so I put down a few things, and these things I feel really set the direction of that new product. And the first thing was defining your terms. We talk a lot about scaling, but what do we actually mean by scaling? That's an overloaded term. So for some people, when they talk about scaling, they're thinking about, let's take agile into HR. Let's take agile into the dentists, like agile in terms of the business agility. Some people thought about in terms of pay rises and bonuses. So what we had to do as a group was discuss what's our remit here, because there's kind of 3 or 4 levels we could go to. We could talk about Scrum. Well, that's quite well defined. We could talk about, like, what does big product Scrum look like? Multiple teams working together, or are we going to spend it wider and wider? Are we going to start going outside of Agile, outside of IT, going to the wider space? That was something we need to discuss, because as we'll see later, it's horses for courses. There is not one size fits all. Secondly, I was really obsessed around the idea of saying, okay, we build up these, what the course is going to be, the learning objectives, but we don't often say why those learning objectives should exist in a training course. Like, what's the vision of this product? Who should it be aimed at? What problem we're trying to solve? And so really the idea that I was having was, I was trying to say, okay, we need to think about this new training course like it's a product. So we need to treat it like product owners and productize it. Okay, focus it and bound it and give it some direction. Now, alas, I can't share a lot of that with you, because that's all non-disclosure agreement with the Scrum Alliance. So that process is very much proprietary and owned by them for the development of their courses. But we went through what I regarded a range of good, solid product management behaviors to construct the feature set of this product. And I felt that way quite well. I felt that was quite a good idea. Because in the end, if you're going to have a product, it has to be feasible, desirable, and viable. Feasible in terms of technology. Like, is this actually doable in a business? It needs to be desirable by a customer. Does someone want to pay for this? And is it viable for the person giving it, like the trainer, the coach? Is it viable for them to sell this product? So we need to really keep our practical commercial heads on, because there's no point inventing a new technique that is intellectually perfect but practically undeliverable. No one's going to use it. And you need to think. So my recommendation here, and it's a really important recommendation, think about your agility in your company like it's a product. It's really important to do this because too often those of us from technology just think about the feasibility of it. Yeah, actually, what's the how viable is this in your business? How desirable is this for your customers? A friend of mine sent me an email 10 minutes ago. All the Scrum Masters are getting laid off in one of his clients. My concern there was okay, the organization did not see the value in those people. Not whether agile was good or bad. They didn't see the value in those people. And that's a terrible thing. So we must be thinking all the time about how we can demonstrate that value. How can we make sure what we do is desirable and viable in the business? Anyway, I digress. So then let's go here. Isaac Newton. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. So, as part of my work, I did a lot of research into a lot of the options that are out there in the market. Okay. And there are lots of options out there in terms of scaling agile. We're going to walk through a few in this hour because what I discovered whilst I was doing this deep dive on all these different methods was there was kind of four different flavors that I would see out there. Four different flavors of scaling framework. They're not one size fits all. So here were the four flavors I saw. I saw methods that were kind of methodologies, methods that were kind of frameworks, methods that were kind of free form, and methods that were basically indoctrination. And what I've done here is invented a classic 2x2 consultant, matrix you'll see in any big four consulting firm slide set. But the 2x2 here is based on practices and power. So of practices going from very prescriptive practices, you must do X, to very principle based, and power going from very empowered people, you get to make your own choices, to very managed. This is what will happen to you, very imposed. And so by looking at this model, we can start seeing some of the current options laid out for people in terms of scaling fall into some of these areas. So where I want to start here is with methodologies. So methodologies, and again, we've got to be careful with how we use the word methodology. Classically, in the agile space, it has meant something very heavy, something very prescriptive, something very recipe based. And so, like, prescriptive and managed equals recipes. That's what we've looked at. Okay. So, the idea, so the scaled agile framework, classic example of this, very heavy, very full. So, it gives answers to everything. So, that reduces down people's fear. This thing was got all the answers. Conceptually easy to install. You just do it all. Not easy to install in reality, but hey, but conceptually easy to install. Uh, Very attractive to business. When they've got a complex, difficult situation, having someone come in and say, "Don't worry, buy this method, buy this book of stuff. You do this book, and it'll make your problems go away." That kind of populist thinking is very attractive. But as H.L. Mencken said, for every complex problem, there's a solution. The simple, neat, and wrong. Here comes the safe joke. So from Voltaire of all people. So you can't say I'm not sophisticated, but Voltaire said the agglomeration, I can't even pronounce it, which was called and which still calls itself the Holy Roman Empire, was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. It's like more of a German federation. The scaled agile framework, hilariously, not scaled, not agile, it's not even a framework. It's a methodology, really, a fully encompassing methodology. And so we need to appreciate that because my worry is that doesn't work very well. That's why the agile movement exists, was to be a counter to that type of thinking, heavy, full, imposed, weighty thinking. That didn't work in the 80s and 90s. It doesn't work now. And part of the big agile rollback is because people are seeing that not work. But they're not blaming the heaviness. They're not blaming the rollout. They're blaming agility, which is causing us problems. So I think there we go. When someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. And so if something looks heavy, It is heavy. If it looks imposed, it is imposed. I know some people will try and say, hey, no, look, we're a framework. We're not that. We're a knowledge base. You can draw. If it looks like a duck, it sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck. Or it could be a goose, which is a bigger, meaner, nastier duck.
Hmm.
So we want to really avoid that kind of methodology based approaches. Now, some people are going for what I would call a free-form approach, very principle-led. So there's some cutting-edge work on this. A variety of certified Scrum trainers in the ScrumAlliance, Colin Bird, Jan Olsen, Per Luigi, Matt Rodnight, Simon Roberts, have been working over the last few years, building up a toolbox, a set of actionable principles that they believe you could use to help you become more agile at scale, right? They've called it ELSE, which I think is a really cool name. Emergent Large Scale Evolution. Lovely little feedback there. Now, there's an issue though with this. So I like this intellectually. Intellectually, I feel this as like a thought person, this works best for me. Hey, we derive everything from first principles. We take these principles and build up from them and build a good organization from it. My worry is that would just be really, really, really hard to do. I mean, like really hard to do. And the possibility of misuse is incredibly high there. If you get something slightly wrong, the thing you build becomes monstrous, like Frankenstein and his monster, you know? Uh, and plus, if you're driving with principles, isn't there a risk of like the concept of thought crime, which bothers me a bit, the idea of indoctrination, where, hey, in a practice, okay, daily scrums, whether you love a daily scrum or hate a daily scrum, right? I can partake in that whether I believe in it or not. Whether I believe in it or not does not necessarily affect my participation. I'm sharing my work, I'm listening to others' work, I'm getting the value from it, right? When you're driving purely from principle, my worry is that's judging you in here. Oh, you're not, you whatever the principle is, you're not, and that's a concern for me. I do think the organization needs to stop at your nose. It can't own how you feel about a topic. And so I get a little bit worried with principle led stuff because I feel that could get into the slimy area of kind of, you're not thinking properly. And your inner monologue is your own inner monologue. So I just get a little bit concerned with that. So there's the classic one that a lot of us have done. So we've had indoctrination, free form methodologies. The fourth is frameworks, which is the term we've used to try and describe things like Scrum. So the reason why agile people have used this sort of rather false separation between the terms methodology and framework is framework has been taken to be more of a frame, a scaffold, a core frames, which is quite light. And then you add all these optional things are onto the frame. So the frame is like a trellis that plants can grow up. Okay, so you can experiment and trial and do different things at different companies. The frames may be the same, but the plants growing on the frames are completely different. So again, that has seemed to have the best success in industry in terms of uptake. A few simple, clear principles and processes followed, and then flexibility with what you fill the gaps with. But here's some problems. They're all based on Scrum. Is Scrum the right thing to base your frame on? I'm a huge Scrum advocate, but I can't guarantee that. And of course, you've got to add extra stuff to it. There's a picture I really wanted to put in this talk, but I was not allowed. It's recorded for posterity. But there's a famous meme online, which is how do you draw an owl? Don't know if any of you know how to draw an owl. You draw two circles, then you draw the rest of the flipping owl. That's not helpful advice, is it? Like, draw the rest of the owl. Thanks. Like, that's not, and that is a little bit of that in Scrum, where kind of like, hey, do these two simple things and then fill the gaps with contextually appropriate stuff. What is it? Mm, your choice. And so there is a bit of a danger there. And if we're not careful, as Aristotle said, nature abhors a vacuum. I.e., if we don't give some advice on that filling, it could be filled with any blooming thing, as we are seeing. Now, running out of time already. Quick story here. Back in, I have no idea of the year, a long time ago. I was in Minneapolis for a conference and I flew in a day early, and then Minneapolis snowed and it had like all the snow I've ever seen in my life in like an hour. So no one else could land. So I was in the hotel on my own, basically, snowed in, waiting for other agile people to turn up. Now, luckily, they had like a library, in the bar. Unfortunately, it was filled with books, obviously as props. Like no one wants to read these books. It's just props there, old books from a bookstore that look cool, put up there. But I found a book I liked the look of, and the book was operating systems design and implementation by Andrew. What's his name? S. Tenenbaum. And I read this book while sat there waiting, and it had some really interesting ideas that I didn't know about how operating systems are designed. And one of the key ideas is actually a really key idea for you. In an operating system, there is a key difference between the kernel and the user space. The kernel is the core functionality, the stuff that keeps the whole operating system working. You don't get to touch that as a customer. That's like needs to be done. If you fiddle with this, the entire thing's going to break and blow up. So the kernel is very tight, very managed. And then there's user space, and that's the stuff, the application space, where you can install your own applications and update them as you like and change them as you like. And the idea of a good operating system is if your applications in user space fall over, they don't take down the kernel. Now, just recently, there has been a huge issue with, I think it was CrowdStrike, which I believe was a third-party piece of software that would make changes to the Windows kernel for antivirus reasons. And it had one failed software launch, which broke loads of computers all over the world. The danger of mixing kernel and user space. Well, if we take that idea to scaling, a lot of our methods in the world of scaling, I'm afraid to say, are all written in kernel space. So something like the Scaled Agile framework is all kernel. That's all of it. You have to do all of it. It's all kernel space. You don't change it. Oof. Then you get stuff like Less, which has a much smaller kernel, but has a wide-ranging user space that you can apply things in. And then you get the final sort of thing I wanted to look at, which is toolboxes and cookbooks, which are basically the idea is everything's in user space. There is no core practices we must do. There's just a range of good practices we could apply. So in the scaling world, that is stuff like Jürgen Appelo's new Unfix, which is effectively a toolbox, which you can draw a lot of practices from to apply to your organization. Now, the danger, again, toolbox is a really good idea. Draw from this toolbox. This stuff is good. The trouble with toolboxes are a lot of people treat them like recipes, like methodologies. So you end up with the term cookbook, which you may have all heard. Oh, we've got a cookbook on this, which is supposed to be a range of advice, yet people also often follow it to the letter. It becomes recipe led, like a good cookbook is, and you end up being very methodology thinking. So, what we need to do is make the right choices from this toolbox, use the right tool for the right job in the right situation. But that's difficult. As we spoke about before, that's really difficult. And that can lead to what I would call guru thinking. So, guru thinking is effectively, or sometimes known as guru syndrome. It's when someone puts themselves at the head. I have all the answers. I am the big brain. And everyone else falls into the position of disciple, the psychological disciple, who they regress, they don't act like adults, they just accept what the guru says. Oh, yes, that's what we should be doing here. That's the right way of working. And that's an incredibly dangerous thing to do in a large organization. Incredibly dangerous. Having one or two gurus set the direction of the organizational structure and everyone acquiesce afterwards. This is going to require a lot of brain power from a lot of people. We can't just centralize it in one or two people and hope they have the right answers. As Brian said from the world famous Monty Python film, Life of Brian, look, you've got it all wrong. You don't need to follow me. You don't need to follow anybody. You've got to think for yourself. You're all individuals. Yes, we're all individuals. Hmm. And so there's entire danger with all the work we're doing here, where we could end up being almost gurus and building up disciples, which is incredibly dangerous if you want to have successful organizational change. As Stella Adler said, one of the founders of the acting workshop, she said, look, in the end, the talent is in the choices you make as an actor. The talent is in the choices. So just before I gave this presentation, I think it was a conference in Belgium, I saw this on LinkedIn. Now I'm going to warn you, I don't believe this is a real thing. I believe this was made as what they call on the internet rage bait. Now, I don't know if you've heard of rage bait, but rage bait is basically how Twitter works these days. Sorry, how X works these days. Rage bait is posting deliberately provocative stuff to upset people. And that's what I believe this was. Maybe, again, I may be wrong. The person who wrote this may actually feel this. And if they do, I'm so sorry for you. But I'm pretty sure it's deliberately designed to be rage bait because it's too clever. Because they're complaining about agility, how awful agile is. Look at them. Stop doing agile. Requirements are not supposed to change every 2 weeks. Poker is a game, not a planning tool. T-shirt size estimates belong in a clothing store. Points, what's burn downs, group. Now, the joke with all this, of course, is that a lot of these things are not Scrum. People say, I hate Scrum. I hate planning poker. I hate Scrum. I hate story points. I hate Scrum. I hate burn down charts. And they're fine to hate those things if they want to, but don't hate Scrum for them because they're not part of it. They're just practices you could do. And so here's an idea for you to really help improve your scaling experience. It's called the Nigel scale, right? Invented by me. That's why it's called the Nigel scale. In 2009, I invented it as a joke. I'm sorry to say, this was a troll. This was basically that in 2009. So I was trying to troll my fellow trainers because we were all arguing about what is Scrum, what isn't Scrum, what should be in certified Scrum Master training, what shouldn't be in the training. And we were having a bit of a discussion, a bit of an argument on it. And I basically just thought, I'm going to post something to wind people up. And so I came up with this joke called the Nigel scale. Now, the joke's on me because the Nigel scale is actually quite useful. It was meant to be a joke, but it turned out, like most jokes, to have an element of truth to it that made it really useful to use in work. Feel free to use the Nigel scale. You don't have to use its name because its name is embarrassing. But the Nigel scale is a way to look at Scrum. In fact, it's a way to look at anything you're doing in a scaling experience. There are like 3 levels of the Nigel scale as a method to analyze. Level 1, I used to call this Scrum, but it's actually the core. There are core things that you need to be doing. If you do not do these things, everything's going to break. So I'll give an example from outside of the world of software. If you are a surgeon, you disinfect your hands before surgery. Right? That's not a choice. You don't get to pick that as a surgeon. You don't get to say, well, I don't believe in washing my hands. It's like, shut up, wash your hands. Oh, why would I wash my hands? There's no such thing as bacteria. Shut up, wash your hands. As a surgeon, it's not a choice. You disinfect your hands before surgery. If you don't do that, people die. If you don't do that in work, you're going to get fired. So there are things in our world of work that I regard as core. Fundamental practices and principles that if you bend them, everything breaks. Now, personally, I believe Scrum is trying to be those core features, those core factors, and I believe that is probably the minimum for me. You may find less than Scrum is okay. That's your choice. You may say more than Scrum. That's your choice. But it's important to work out what's core and fundamental in your environment. Okay. Like for me, empowerment. That's a core factor that needs to be in any successful product development. If you don't empower your teams, you're doomed. And a lot of people now in IT and technology are currently throwing away Scrum Masters and unempowering their teams, putting bosses in charge of them again. And I believe that's dangerous and wrong and dangerous. I know I said dangerous twice, but wrong isn't enough. It's going to cost people their careers and companies their future. However, and here is the problem, people, this core stuff is quite small. There's not much of it in product development. Not much of it at all. Most of it in our world is Nigel scale too. This is stuff that Scrum doesn't officially care about. This is the gray area of good practice where, hey, it works for that organization, it works for that organization, it may work for this organization. May. But may is the important word there. And this is where you're going to have to be agile with your agile, open minded, humble, run experiments, learn. You coach organizations to self organize their own answers to their own complex problems. That's what you're trying to do, right? So, what else is there? Then we get Nigel Scale 3. Boom. Stuff that is bad. Stuff that is bad. Stuff we just need to avoid. Stuff that's just horribly wrong. Anti-patterns or negative behaviors. Now, again, be careful in the world. A lot of people use the term anti-pattern just to mean rubbish. It can mean rubbish, but a lot of anti-patterns or bad behaviors. A true anti-pattern looks like a good answer and turns out to be a bad idea. So it looks good on the surface, but as you implement it, you realize it's a bad idea. So when we spoke about anti-patterns earlier on, actually something like implementing safe is probably an anti-pattern. Not because safe is rubbish or anything like that, but because imposing top down all over the organization, the same flavor of work, rigorously conforming with no variance or variability looks like a good idea, but turns out to be a pretty bad idea when you're actually trying to do it. So it makes sense in terms of the word anti-pattern. And so this 3-point model, poor, good, bad, we could use to look at those scaling models. And I did a video on this. I may upload it to the network. I did a video on this a few years ago, sort of analyzing the current famous scaling approaches with the Nigel scale and looking to see which parts are core, which parts are good. Because this is what they feel. They feel these are core and these are good. But in reality, these methods are probably a bit more like this: core versus good versus bad. And this is the danger of those full methodology approaches, wrapping core practice with a potentially good practice with potentially anti-patterns, wrapping them all together and delivering them as if they're one equivalent parcel of work. You know, and this is just dangerous for us. You know, those small anti-patterns could cause a lot of damage. Like the famous joke, waiter, waiter, there's a fly in my soup. What's he doing? Sir, it looks like the backstroke. The fly damages your soup. But I'll give you a worse example. Imagine if you were in a restaurant and you were offered a soup, a high-end exclusive soup, an expensive and flavorsome soup, maybe a bouillabaisse, maybe a French onion. And the waiter comes up to you and the waiter says, ma'am, sir, I can inform you now, this soup is Michelin star quality. The highest quality ingredients, caviar, truffles, whatever high quality ingredients are. And I can inform you now, only 10% of this soup is urine. Only 10%. 90% of this soup is lovely, flavorsome ingredients. And just 10% is the discharge of an animal, the urine of a large cow. How would you feel about that soup? Would you be saying, well, wow, caviar? Or would you be going, excuse me, did you say urine? Yes, 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 yes. You mean urine? Yes, yes, I mean urine. From a cow? Yes, yes, from a cow. In my soup? Yes, yes. Only 10%. Only 10%. Well, gosh, I'll have 3 glasses then. The bad practice damages the good practice. And so now we have a model to really look at this stuff and say, okay, there are practices in here that could potentially damage some of these other practices and damage us. And same thing with the framework model. There are some things we can install that may work and some things that may not work. So here's, I don't know if you saw earlier on, I was playing with the word ing, unveiling, failing, changing, scaling, or is it unveiling, changing, failing, scaling? But the ing sound was there because this is the important thing about this entire presentation. Ing. right? The scaled agile framework, it happened in the past. Ing is what you're doing now. You are changing, you are evolving, you are scaling, you are adapting, you are using. That sort of active verb is where we are now. And so it's really important to understand that your organization is not frozen. It's not, like a 2D model. It's three-dimensional, your organization. And most scaling approaches do not capture that. They're two-dimensional. They say, this is what you do now. And they don't talk anything about how do you get there, how do you move on from it, and how this actual process and all these methods should evolve within it. Because good practices evolve over time. There are practices in the agile space that are a good idea when you're a new team and decay quickly. So some of the most famous techniques, like planning poker, the famous card game a lot of agile teams used to play, right? There we go, planning poker. This is the perfect example of a practice that's great in a new team, but becomes boring and useless or wasteful in a mature team. Story points. Now, this is too big for this presentation. Maybe I'll do another one on it. But story points is a really complex argument at the moment. Some people hate story points. Some people love story points. Some people are unsure about story points. And if you go on social media, you will find these people arguing furiously. And of course, the joke is they're all correct. It just depends on where you are in the experience. If you're newer, story points can be great. If you're mature, story points may be wasteful. In fact, I'm gonna change this actually, because I think story points are the perfect example of something where you start off a bit unsure, becomes a good idea, and then fades into a bad idea. The perfect example of a practice that has a birth, a life, and a death. Nearly all of your agile practices will be like that. Some of them age like milk and go off. Some of them mature like a fine wine. And so you need to keep on top of this if you're going to be in the scaling world. Because look at all these methods, these scaling ideas talk to you about. As you mature, as your organization grows and evolves, what is good and bad will evolve and change. That's going to cause you a lot of problems. So this practice is good today, but in 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, 2 weeks, that practice may not be appropriate anymore. And so what we're going to have to think about is these two things: knowing where to have discipline and rigor, where to be open-minded and flexible, and don't confuse the two. Knowing where you need discipline and where you need flexibility. So basically, confusing a good practice with a core practice is a bad practice. And that's what's happened all over the world of Agile. People have taken up contextual good practices, treated them like law, and then fallen out of favor with them as they no longer deliver value. You wouldn't expect your bread to be immortal. You would not expect your cheese to be immortal. You would not expect your car to last forever. So why should these methods? Everything's got a life cycle. Everything ages and decays or matures and grows. We need to be able to communicate that, because what people often get wrong is the difference between different and wrong. What people often get wrong is the difference between different and wrong. They confuse variability, areas where you need to do it like this and we need to do it like this. And confusing that between what I would call deviation, which is, well, if you do it this way, we're going to survive. And if you do it that way, we're all going to die. We're all so that's a mistake that gets made all over the place. It's being made today. People are laying off scrum masters, not realizing that's going to kill their company. They don't realize it. They have no idea it is, but oh boy, it is. And when it comes up, it's really going to bash them. Okay. It's really going to bash them. And so we've just got to get on top of this in terms of agile people. We've got to be able to communicate this better. Hey, that is variability. That's fine. This, I'm afraid to say, is deviation, and it's where it's going to get us into a lot of trouble. A couple of other things, by the way. I don't know if I've got time for these things, but I'm going to mention them to you anyway because, hey, it's my video and I'll do what I like. I don't know if you've noticed, but most agile processes have no form of error handling. They basically, the error handling is deal with it in retrospective, but they have no way to actually handle something going wrong in the process. There's like no, like if you look at good software design, we've got things like exception handling, we've got things like graceful degradation, where the system falls over gracefully and doesn't all just crash and burn. A lot of agile methods don't have this, and all the scaling methods don't have it. And so it's really, really dangerous because if something goes a bit wrong, the entire thing just collapses in a heap. So if you're going to be scaling effectively, I would suggest thinking about your error handling. Now, when I say error handling, I don't just mean, oh, the software's broken, but I mean actually how you handle issues in the process. Oh, our planning didn't work. Okay, what's the graceful degradation of that? What's the steps we take to capture that and improve that in our lives? There isn't enough talk about this. It's a big topic. It's a topic on its own, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed. And when I wrote this presentation, I actually, and this is my eternal shame, I ended up watching a 4 hour video on Disney. Disney had a new hotel in one of their Disney parks, a Star Wars hotel. Right, probably got all the Star Wars references here. A Star Wars hotel called Star Cruiser or something, very expensive. And this lady did, I can only describe it as the perfect analysis and demolition of that hotel. It shut down, it was a grand failure. Why did it fail? But she was making it really interesting. She was chatting about people were telling her off for having the wrong experience in the hotel. Like you're playing the game wrong. You must have the wrong personality. No one else has these issues, so it's clearly on you. And she was trying to point out, that's not how this experience should work. It's just like I've been, I've been taking part. It shouldn't. The problem's not in the user. And so a lot of people, a lot of scrum masters, agile coaches out there, I'm afraid to say, blame picnic, problem in between keyboard and chair. They blame the user, not the actual methods themselves. And I think we should take a good, long, hard look at our methods. Because if everyone constantly gets them wrong, that's something we're doing wrong. It's not them doing it wrong. If you can't work out how to turn on a shower, it's not because you're incompetent. It's because the shower designer has not made it easy and intuitive about how you turn on that shower. I'm going to do some talks on this, by the way, if you're interested, some exclusive events over the next few weeks on this very topic. On let's look at how we can improve our methods a bit to help make it easier for our customers. But again, that's another topic for another day. What I would like you to do post event, if you haven't already, is really get into Cynefin. If you really want to get on top of successful scaling in this complex modern world of work, Cynefin, the method from David Snowden, I think is a really important method to understand. It's incredibly complex. It's very, very academic as an approach, but I think it's the foundational piece of our ScrumAlliance scaling product is Cynefin, and I think it's a really important place to look. A lot of what I've been talking about so far are all captured in Cynefin. The difference between good practice and best practice, evolving and emerging a system. That's all about complex work. I really think these ideas are important and well worth investigating further if you're interested. I'm sure someone on the network will do a Cynefin presentation, and I thoroughly recommend you dig into it a bit. If I had more time, I would as well. But here's one interesting thing about Cynefin. Sometimes it tells us that, the simple thing does work. We just need to follow this best practice. We don't need variation. We don't need deviation. We don't need iteration or recursion. We just need to do it this way again. So the true agile organizations that are 100% agile shouldn't be 100% agile. There should be large parts that understand they have clear work that is done in a traditional way, and that's the right thing to do. So you can see my worry. My big concern with building this workshop was, do we pick a side? Do we say, hey, methodologies are bad, frameworks are good, or vice versa? Or do we teach the controversy? And frankly, if we teach the controversy, can we be accidentally supporting the wrong side of the argument? You must have seen that in real life, where they say, okay, let's discuss, is the Earth flat or round? Here we have a nationally renowned scientist to tell us how the world is round. And here we have Bob from Arkansas who's going to tell us how the world is flat. Um, False equivalence. And plus, most people outside our world don't care about this controversy. It's all the same thing. It's all agile. And so, as the famous quote from the journalist goes, if someone says it's raining and another person says it's dry, it's not your job as a journalist to quote them both. Your job is to look out the window and find out what's true. So what I was terrified of doing in this workshop is teaching certain practices and somehow accidentally giving them a weight they don't deserve. They say, hey, here's something you could do, and accidentally but make that into a new stealth framework being sold by someone. So the Scrum Alliance is a broad church, a broad church. It's not a cult where everyone has the same beliefs. So any product used by Scrum Alliance guides and trainers needs to allow a wide range of opinions anyway. So we can't lock them down to one approach or one method. That would be alien to the Scrum Alliance, let alone alien to what we believe in. So what we've been aiming for with this new product to help deal with this, right? And this is the last 5 minutes of the presentation, a quick journey through this course. Number one, we're aiming at a big agile. So if you've got big product development, that's what we're trying to do. So not thousands of teams working on different things, just do Scrum. Not trying to make your dentist agile, that's business agility. What we're trying to do is help lots of people work together successfully. And what we've done is build a product that I feel is usable by everyone. My big fear was we end up designing a workshop that only works for high-end skilled people. So as we were building the workshop, we tried to make it more and more inclusive because everyone needs to be involved in scaling to make scaling work. It cannot just be a few leaders. So the things we've got to do are these three things. We've got to teach people about what scaling is. We've got to really get them into this idea of using patterns to scale. And we need to really embrace change. So you can see here, the philosophy of this course is effectively three phrases: scaling versus scaled versus descaling. So scaled was the conversation we just had about pre-built, pre-configured heavy methods. Scaling was the idea we just had about evolving and changing, and descaling, the third idea, was about, of course, less is more. We shouldn't just be very additive with our scaling approaches. Our entire approach should be looking to descale, like descaling a fish, reducing down. What can we take away? Not people, not jobs, but more excess waste so the people we've got can do so much better and can have such better lives and be so much more high performing. And so the suggested approach in our course is this idea of pattern led, principle infused. Now, if you don't know what patterns are, here's a quote from Christopher Alexander. He's talked about each pattern describes a problem which occurs over and over again in our environment, then describes the core of the solution to that problem in such a way you can use this solution a million times over without ever doing it the same way twice. So Alexander himself, not an IT guy, famously actually an architect, a city planner, city designer. And so his famous book on this, which I have here, by the way, I'm just going to wave it at you. Here we go. A pattern language. There's the book, very expensive, very thick. Has a range of patterns of useful ideas that you could use in city design or city planning. Like here, for example, the 6-foot balcony. It doesn't mean all balconies must be the same shape or the same design. It means here's a solution to possibly solve the problems that we don't have enough outside spaces or liminal spaces to share and to live in. So this idea of patterns is actually baked into the agile world. This idea was taken right at the start, organizational patterns by Jim Copeland, Jim Harrison, design patterns by the Gangs of Four, if you ever heard of them, in terms of software design. This idea of patterns has been around a long time. And so we really should be drawing on these patterns from around our environment. Now, unfortunately, there is no one pattern library out there, like, the Library of Alexandra in terms of organizational agile shape, but there are loads of potential libraries. There's real ones like ScrumPlop, the famous library of the Scrum pattern set up by Jeff Sutherland et al. That's available. But you can also use frameworks as pattern stores, like the large scale Scrum framework, like SAFe, like Unfix. You can draw from these places, but draw contextually and draw appropriately. We're going to use SAFe like this. Scaled Agile Framework. Well, what does the E stand for? The E stands for the magic E. You know, the E in safe makes the word safe, not saf. We're going to use that E. So bit is bite, rob is robe. We're going to use E to mean experiment, emergence, evolution. So we get into this idea of using these methods and evolving them. And in that workshop, we're going to talk all about scaling is changing. 70% of organizational change programs fail. So what we're going to have to do is use methods and approaches to help us handle that. So a lot of the workshop is around this concept called scaffolding, where scaffolding is methods you use temporarily to get you to a result. If you break your arm, your cast is scaffolding. You have scaffolding around your house, it's there to help them change the roof. These are all semi-permanent tools to help you achieve results. A lot of the change work is about those semi-permanent tools. So, what's my conclusion to all this? Well, I don't know. You should take all this with a pinch of salt. I quite like the Phantom Menace. But what I've got here is a bit of a quote by myself that I'm going to read to you. Perhaps what scaling could look like is a large volunteer force experimenting in a safe to fail way, evolving constantly, changing with these scaffolds supporting them, drawing on recognized patterns, but not just doing them slavishly and thoughtlessly, but doing them thoughtfully and contextually with a strong conceptual background of the theory, understanding the context, both of the theory and the playground of agility, creating a large scale world for great things to happen to good people and for good people. That's what we're aiming at. But for me, at the end of that workshop, you end up with patterns to try, tools to change with, and tools to help you to try and the change, and an understanding of the world of Agile. It's all about scaling, not scaled. Now, of course, the danger is, as I'm afraid to say, Dora Gateskill said, her husband was Hugh Gateskill, a very famous UK politician. And he did very well for himself, had all the senior roles in the government. And on the back end of his career, as he was sliding down, he once gave a speech in the British Parliament about the European Union, of all things, about how we shouldn't join it. And so he was very proud of the speech because he got lots of cheers at the end. And his wife pierced his bubble completely by saying, "Yes, yes, Hugh, but all the wrong people were cheering." So he was getting, and that's my worry with some of this stuff. My worry is you've got to be very clever with it, in terms of patterns. It's very easy if you're not careful to fall into the trap of the people who say, "Oh, yeah, we don't need frameworks at all, do we? We'll just make it up as we go along," and fall in with the anarchists and the chaotics. And so we've got to be very careful. We're not saying no Scrum, we're not saying no frameworks. We're hugely supportive of frameworks and, in fact, incredibly endorsing of Scrum. What we're saying is you can't just use them in isolation. You also have to draw upon these patterns from other spaces and draw them in thoughtfully and carefully. Just remember what we said about the scalability, about, making it a product. Think of your stuff, like think of your scaling thing as a product. Is it feasible? Does it actually work? Is it viable? Does it work for the business? If it's going to require 700 new roles, it's not going to fly. Is it desirable? Do your customers want it? Do your customers, internal and external, know this is valuable to them? Because your customers inside, if your business don't know how valuable this is for them, don't know how valuable you are for them, you're going to end up on that garbage heap along with a lot of my friends and a lot of our colleagues. And so we've got to get this dynamic and get something in the middle that's working for us. Just remember, in the end, it isn't about the framework, whether it's safe, less, CASP or whatever. That's not the thing. That's not the product that I'm trying to sell to you. This is not a sales pitch to get you to buy my training course. What I'm trying to get you to help understand is that we need to get to a better world. What people want is not less safe, Scrum, CASP, Agile. What they want is better results, a better world, a happier life. And if what we do doesn't deliver that, as you can see in the world of work is ruthless to cast away what doesn't work for them. So we must always be outcome driven. Hey, are we helping them deliver these results, these better world of work that we're trying to create? Now, if you do want trading in this, give me a shout. Hey, money, money, money. But all joking aside, What I would say, though I would love you to come to me and do this, what's more important for me is you go out there and do it with someone, learn more, improve your experience. Otherwise, your experience is going to get crushed. If you want to get in contact with me on anything, here's my contact details on the screen. You can catch me on any environment, or if you want, especially you can get me through the network. Send a ask for question. I'll reply to it for you. It'll be great, great fun. Give me a shout, and maybe we can do some exclusive events on some of these topics. I just touched upon Kenevin. I did one line on it. Maybe we could have an exclusive event on that. Get together as a group and chat about it. But I'd only know if you tell me. So please give me a shout on this. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And my time box is expired. Um, it won't happen when you're watching this, but for the live people, Alistair Coburn's up next. I'll see you all. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.